In Eleanor's house, the mornings always carried the same scent: dried lavender, old paper, and a faint hint of Ceylon tea. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, slowly drawing golden lines across the parquet floor, as if counting the years lived within these walls. Eleanor woke up early. At 82, sleep becomes as fragile as a porcelain cup, but she did not mind. On the contrary, she cherished these quiet hours before the world filled with noise and haste. Her husband, with whom she had shared half a century of quiet joys and bustling family dinners, had passed away 3 years ago. At first, the silence in the house felt deafening, almost physical. But over time, she learned to weave this silence into her life like a thin silver thread into a tapestry. Eleanor carefully kept his things, yet she did not turn her home into a museum of grief. Photos of their children and grandchildren still stood on the dresser, and in the garden, his favorite peonies continued to bloom every spring. Every movement she made was filled with a slow, steady dignity. As she brushed her silver hair before an antique mirror, she didn't look at her wrinkles. Instead, she looked into her own eyes, which still remembered the young girl with the light, rhythmic step. Eleanor knew that life is like an old book. Some chapters are already read, and the pages have turned yellow. But that doesn't mean the story is over. She believed in harmony and order, unaware that fate had already begun preparing its most unexpected twist. On the other side of the city, in a cozy apartment cluttered with blueprints and albums, Victor began his day. His morning was more austere: strong black coffee without sugar and the mandatory reading of the newspapers. A former architect, he was used to clean lines and structures, but lately, a certain chaos had settled in his soul. A light but aching sadness for his late wife and for the time that was slipping through his fingers. His grandson, Philip, often visited under the pretext of helping with the archives. Philip possessed a quality rare for a young man. He knew how to listen. Working as a restorer at the city library, he treated the past with reverence. That day, Victor asked him to help sort through old boxes brought from their country house. Among yellowed estimates and sketches of bridges lay an old leather suitcase with tight brass clasps. Philip opened it carefully. Inside, beneath layers of documents, he discovered a false bottom. His fingers touched the rough fabric of the lining, where something crinkled. At that moment, Victor had gone to the kitchen for a second cup of coffee, whistling an old tune. Philip gently pulled a bundle of letters from the hiding place, tied with simple twine. On the top envelope, dated 1962, a name was written in elegant calligraphy: to Eleanor. The letter had never been opened. A postmark indicated it had been returned to the sender, marked "Addressee not found." Philip felt a chill run down his spine. He recognized his grandfather's handwriting, but he had never heard this name in any of their family stories. For several days, Philip could not find peace. He studied the envelopes, not yet daring to open them, but his professional instinct told him, within these unspoken words lay a secret that had altered 2 lives. He began his own small investigation, using archives and modern search engines, tools his grandfather had never mastered. He was searching for that very Eleanor for whom these lines were intended. Meanwhile, the city lived its usual life. Friday arrived, the day Eleanor traditionally visited a small corner grocery store, famous for its fresh bread and homemade cheese. She loved the building, its ancient brickwork, heavy oak doors, and the scent of cinnamon that enveloped everyone who entered. It was her ritual, an island of stability in a changing world. Victor, on the other hand, felt a strange restlessness that day. Philip, as if by chance, suggested they take a walk in that specific neighborhood, claiming a new coffee shop had opened there with that very same coffee from Victor's youth. Leaving his grandfather at the store's entrance, Philip excused himself for an important call and stepped aside, watching from a distance. He knew Eleanor lived somewhere nearby, but a meeting in this vast city still seemed like a mathematical impossibility. However, fate, like a skilled architect, has its own calculations. Victor adjusted the collar of his tweed jacket, pushed open the heavy door, and stepped into the cool air of the shop, moving toward the scent of cinnamon and a woman in a cashmere cardigan who, at that moment, was choosing the finest apples. Inside the small shop, a soft gloom reigned, pierced by pillars of dusty golden light where myriads of specks danced. The air was thick with the aroma of freshly ground coffee and the tart scent of apples. Eleanor moved along the shelves slowly, her thin gloved hand barely touching the surfaces, as if she were reading the history of the place with her fingertips. She paused by a basket of fruit, selecting the reddest apple, a symbol of the fading summer. Victor appeared around the corner suddenly, as if materializing from the shadows of the past. He did not notice the woman, as he was preoccupied with studying the label on a pack of tea, the same tea they once drank together on the veranda of the old rowing club. The collision was gentle, but enough to make the apple slip from Eleanor's hands. It rolled across the wooden floor with a dull thud, coming to a rest by Victor's polished boots. He froze, staring at the fallen fruit, then slowly raised his eyes. In that moment, time in the store stood still. The sounds of the cash register and the noise of the street outside faded into a distant echo. Victor looked at the woman before him, and in his mind, two images superimposed. A youthful face with a daring gaze, and this majestic, calm countenance framed by silver hair. In her eyes, he saw the same numbness and the flash of recognition that pierces deeper than any electric shock. The world around them began to shift. The grocery shelves vanished, and the random passers-by faded away. Within the silence of that gaze, decades rushed by. Victor slowly held out the apple to her, and when their fingers touched, they both felt a strange warmth. The very same warmth they had felt 50 years ago, when they first brushed against each other at a school ball. Eleanor searched his features, looking for the young man she once considered her only destiny. The deep wrinkles on his forehead seemed like a map of the roads he had traveled without her, while the kind crinkle of his brown eyes confirmed it. The heart of this man remained unchanged. The recognition was total and absolute. This was not a meeting of two strangers. It was a homecoming after an infinitely long journey. They stood in the aisle without uttering a word, yet their silence was more eloquent than any confession. In this wordless dialogue, everything was present. The bitterness of lost contact, the long years spent with others, and the sudden realization that the thread binding them was stronger than steel. Victor pressed his hat to his chest, bowing his head in a gesture that combined an apology for the accidental collision with deep reverence for the woman he had never stopped searching for in a crowd. The following morning, the park greeted them with a solemn stillness. Trees dressed in copper and gold were reflected in the motionless surface of the pond. Eleanor sat on a bench, holding an old herbarium album on her knees, where the ghosts of their shared summer rested between the pages. When Victor appeared at the end of the path, his gait was unusually brisk, and in his hands he clutched a small bouquet of the very flowers they used to gather in the meadows outside of town. They walked down the avenue shoulder to shoulder, maintaining that respectful distance characteristic of their generation, yet their shadows on the path merged into one. Every gesture, every turn of the head was filled with meaning. Victor pointed out the architectural details of the park gazebos, and Eleanor saw in this his eternal love for harmony and order. She showed him the pressed flowers in her album, and he understood that she had preserved not just plants, but the very memory of him. It was a strange date, devoid of youthful fervor, but filled with incredible depth. They needed no words to explain how they had survived in solitude. The rhythm of their steps, their synchronized breathing, and the way Victor carefully supported her elbow on the uneven path spoke of the beginning of a new chapter. Philip, watching them from behind a colonnade, saw two people who had finally stopped being shadows of their past and began to simply live in the present, under the golden sun of their late autumn.